Hey, what's going on, guys? My name is Mouse. If you don't subscribe, I'm gonna kill.
Donate a large sum of money to a YouTube executive-approved charity.
Did you guys know that a glass of milk is made with 20% less emissions than it was 15 years ago?
Woo! I had no idea.
Across America, dairy farmers have dumped countless gallons of fresh, perfectly usable milk because there is no one to buy it.
So let me show you how we, at least in America, got brainwashed by milk.
U.S. Department of Agriculture policy that states that schools must not directly or indirectly restrict the sale or marketing of milk.
That's utterly awesome.
Who invited this guy?
Good guy. I want milk.
That was an intro. So, ladies and gentlemen, obviously, I have went down a rabbit hole recently. You ever done that? You ever have a wild, crazy night on YouTube and then show up to work the next day and then talk to your coworkers like, you believe in the moon? I did that, and now I'm making a YouTube video about how Big Milk is coming for your kids. Are you excited? Are you ready? The rabbit hole for dairy and dairy-related products goes so much deeper than you would ever guess it does. All the way back to the 1700s, Reagan, the government cheese, which is real. They had like a Fort Knox warehouse filled with cheese, and then the government was like, what do we do with this? Let's make poor people eat it. Oh my God, why didn't I think of that? And today, instead of just going down that rabbit hole by myself and then trying to explain it to my coworkers and having my coworkers ignore me, I'm taking you fuckers with me. I am not going down alone. Everybody's coming with me. And to kick this whole thing off, ladies and gentlemen, I want to rewind the clocks just a little bit like this. Let's rewind the clock all the way back to when you were in school. And if you're in school now, first of all, you probably shouldn't be here. And second, just rewind it to yesterday or whatever. I want you all to think about when you were in school and you went to lunch, and I want you to think of your favorite lunch that they served in your cafeteria. And I want you to think back in the day when you were in school, or back yesterday when you were still, you know what I mean. I want you to think about your favorite meal that you got from the cafeteria. During lunchtime, what was your favorite meal? Was it the chicken nuggets, or was it the weird Italian amalgamation? Honest to God, I'm like 75% sure if this came out of a box, you could look on the side of the box at the ingredients list and it would just say Italian. Question mark. So you're thinking of the chicken tenders, so you're thinking of the Italian. Pizza's a good one. A lot of schools have Pizza Fridays, which we are going to be getting into that. You're thinking of your favorite meal. What did you get to drink with that? Now, if you're like me and you said milk, and you got milk to drink with your meatloaf and Italian, you'd not only be joining me, but also the vast majority of people in the United States. Over 50% of kids in school in the United States drink milk every day at school. You know what? That's a stat. I gotta write that down, baby. Now all I need's an eraser. You bitch came prepared. God damn it. Here's the stat all written down and taken care of. A lot of you might be worried about like where I'm getting my stats from, or what are his sources. And in the spirit of academic integrity, I just want to go ahead and tell you the internet, obviously. Duh. So 50% of kids in school drink milk. Why? Because it's not just some public schools, it's not just most public schools, it is every public school is peddling milk like they're getting paid for it. Because they are. But why were they peddling milk so hard? Why were we drinking milk 5 times a day out of a cardboard box? Because I don't really like milk. I never sought milk out. It just kind of happened to me like a car accident. I went to school every day for 18 years just to get milked. I got milked as an underage kid at a public school every day, 5 days a week. And what's crazy is I didn't even know who Dr. Disrespect was at the time, but I had the idea to make this video when I realized that outside of when I was in school, I have not once ever went out to get a meal by myself, with my family, my friends, and then ordered milk at a restaurant. Not one singular time. And I graduated 10 years ago. God damn it, buddy, we are old as fuck. And not even one singular time in those 10 years if I went to an Olive Garden and was like, yes, could I get milk with that garlic bread? It sounds nasty. Say it out loud. It sounds gross. And it's not even necessarily the school's fault. I'll prove it once I find my marker. And we'll get to whose fault it is a little bit later in the video. It's the government. But right now I want to tell y'all a story about Mariel Williamson. I'm only 25% sure that I got the spelling right, and I'm even less confident about the pronunciation. And that's the high quality journalism that you can come to expect from this channel. Williamson was a student from California. She was aspiring to be a animal or environmental lawyer, which obviously I thought was kind of funny because what kind of pig needs a lawyer besides your mom got him? And she, back in 2023, wanted to set up a protest outside of her school's cafeteria that was protesting the inhumane conditions of dairy farms and the pollution that they cause. And the principal of that school ended up giving her permission to do this, but with one weird stipulation. The principal told Williamson that she could protest the downsides of dairy farms outside of the cafeteria with little booklets of information that explained how bad dairy farms are, but he said you can do that only if you also promote the benefits of dairy farms. So you might be thinking to yourself, was this guy like a milk salesman on the side? Was he peddling milk on the side? Like, here, kid, just a bite, just one hit, eat it. Now, the principal wasn't just selling milk on the side. I mean, probably, I don't know the fucking guy. His decision more than likely came from a USDA policy that says schools must not directly or indirectly restrict the sale or marketing of fluid milk. It says so right here. I wrote it down on my phone. We're gonna write it down on the whiteboard too, because this is gonna come up a lot in this video. Schools must not directly or indirectly restrict the sale or marketing of milk. The marketing part is something I want to focus on, because you also can't restrict the sale of milk, but that's more of a solid thing, more like, yeah, obviously everybody knows what this means, but marketing is more of a vacuous term. There's a lot of open to interpretation shit going on there, because like we already covered, you obviously can't go and protest milk on school grounds unless you also advertise milk at the same time, which doesn't make sense. But it goes even deeper than that. You literally cannot tell students at a public school that it is okay to not drink milk. You cannot tell them that. So how the fuck did this happen? Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to start all the way back in the 1800s. Because just like any good YouTuber, we're going to start absurdly further back than I need to tell this story. Honestly, you're just lucky I'm not starting with something like, in the beginning there was darkness and only darkness, and within that darkness there was cow titty. I'm not gonna do that. Humans started drinking milk 10,000 years ago in the Neolithic time period. I only say that to give some context of what I'm about to say. 10,000 years ago, we started drinking milk, and we made it all the way to the 1700s before people was like, what if we only drink milk? So 10,000 years ago to the 1700s, I mean, we had a good run here. One of the most prominent supporters of this diet is a guy named Dr. Charles Sanford Porter. He was an advocate of this diet because he thought it was a form of detoxification and thought it'd get rid of diseases in your body. You know, just the normal 1700s medicine shit. And he got that idea from a guy named Dr. Taylor from London. The internet doesn't know a lot about Dr. Taylor, and I know significantly less than that, so we're just gonna go on to the next guy. That Dr. Taylor inspired a guy named George Cheney. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. I've only read it so far. Scottish physician is really hard to say. This guy is a renowned Scottish physician who's known for vegetarianism. George was the closest thing you could probably get to a celebrity in the 1700s. And George was, when I say he was known for vegetarianism, he was one of the first guys to advocate for a entirely vegetable and milk diet. That sounds so nasty. All this dude was eating was potatoes and sucking cow titty, and then he died in the 1700s. That is truly the Scottish dream. But up being like as much of a celebrity as you could possibly be in the 1700s, he made one of the first ever celebrity diets. You know, like that fake thing that Oprah does where she's like, I love bread, except he liked milk.
I love bread.
And from this point on, the advertising for milk just went off the rails. And it all really started to kick off in the 1930s. You guys know the 1930s. Everybody was having a good time, starving to death, killing each other. It was great. It was in the 1930s that a little something called the Great Depression was happening. Yay, depression! Woo! Give it up for depression! And it was during the Great Depression that the US government started to subsidize farmers to stabilize food production and pricing. I am so positive that this has never went wrong before. So along with government subsidies, we also, as humans, just figured out how to make milk year-round. See, milk used to be a seasonal thing where you could only gather and harvest milk like at a certain time of year. But farmers who had nothing to do other than to pull on those things figured out a way to do it year-round, which created a, say it with me, surplus. Yay, surplus. A surplus of milk. We now have a surplus of milk. And obviously, we had to do something with it. And in 1933, something called the Agricultural Adjustment Act was passed. This provided subsidies to dairy farmers because milk was now considered an essential food. This was the New Deal era politics. Franklin Delano Roosevelt and shit. You know, FDR. This cutie. The guy who reportedly compared himself to the Sphinx in Egypt. That's real. And the goal with this was to boost agricultural prices by reducing a surplus. Surplus causes frowny faces. Look, I can prove it. And you might think the best way to lower a surplus is by like limiting the production on it, because if the demand is not as high as the production, then obviously you're getting a motherfucking surplus. And like we already said, that causes frowny faces, but no, what that actually means is they're just gonna make people drink it. We're not gonna stop the production on milk, we are just gonna make you eat it. And then in 1935, something called the Milk Marketing Orders was passed. This let the government set a minimum price on milk, completely ignoring the market, completely ignoring the supply and demand theory of economics that I'm sure somebody knows about. The reason they had to do this in 1935 is because milk is a perishable item. Milk prices were obviously unstable because it's a perishable item, and farmers had to sell that shit quick. So just from the 1930s by itself, you can kind of start to see the groundwork for the weird milk state that we live in now starting to form. And it goes from groundwork to full-on skyscraper in the 1940s. The 1940s is when milk started to pop off. And that's mostly because in 1946, the National School Lunch Act was passed. This is the act that made it a requirement for schools to sell milk to get funding. It is stated that this bill is aimed to give kids enough calories to, you know, live and to offload agricultural surplus. You remember when it said surplus and there was a frowny face? Well, we found a fucking solution for it. Let's make kids drink it. The bill explicitly aims to give kids a taste for milk. You know, because that's a super normal and not fucked up at all thing to do. You know, just like my uncle gave me a taste for whiskey and gambling and incest. Hey, do y'all feel like a song coming on or something? Ah, shit, I'm already singing. Ah, fuck. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for this. Bitch, I'm stacking up cheddar like Kraft singles. Milkman snatching up some bread like some fat seagulls. Stealing money from your kids, it ain't that evil. Bitch, you coming at Big Milk and might get very lethal. Bitch, I'm talking, don't be mad at me just cause my future looking legendary. Ooh, I'm making cheese at night, you know that bread is necessary. Just like Cinnamon Toast Crunch, you know that milk is gonna carry. Very scary like blueberry in this click, you know you gotta hand it over, bust it open, throw it back, repent. I'm talking, give your bitch the holdie, that bitch used to 2%. I'm talking, I don't give a fuck about no milk alternatives. I'm talking, how you fucking milk an almond, that don't make no sense. I'm talking, run up on Big Milk, we leave you laying on cement. I'm talking, you ain't got no cheddar, you're lactose intolerant. I'm talking, cash cow, I'm a bully, stealing money from your kids. I'm talking, about to get the horns, you better shut the fuck up when I'm talking.
Milk
yeah, buddy, on point down to the letter. She tugging on my udder, can't nobody do it better. Lactose tolerant, I stay with the cheddar. Covered in white, a splash of milk, I get her wetter. It's crunch time and I'm the motherfucking captain. Yapping about your guala and I know you out here capping. Stacking up cheese on the track, I be lapping. About to take your bitch ass for a ride, you better strap in. Tricks are for kids, but this chopper sings for everybody. Toucan Sam, loop the block and he'll catch a body. His aim is great, me and Tony pop out with the shotty. I said it's great, pull off in a Audi. M-I-L-K, man, I love killing. You crying about this shit way before it's even spilling. Okay, alright, what the fuck? Do you know how hard it is to do a fucking song about
Backing up cheddar like craft singles. Milkman snatching up some bread like some fat seagulls. Stealing money from your kids, it ain't that evil. Bitch, you coming at Big Milk and might get very lethal. Bitch, I'm talking. Don't be mad at me, my future looking legendary. Cheese at night, you know that bread is necessary. Sentimentals crunch, you know that milk is gonna fucking carry. I'm done. I'm sorry. My bad. And from this bill and into the future, the marketing for milk went absolutely crazy. And just by pure coincidence, this is also... Damn. Just by pure coincidence, this is also when the Japanese started drinking milk. I wonder why that is. I'm sorry. I'm sorry again. Aside from that terrible joke, I'm gonna give y'all a little context as to what I'm talking about here. Now, with a small disclaimer, I will say it is tin hat time, boys. Boys, tin hat. Everybody get your tin hat. We all got one. I say tin hat time and I give that disclaimer because this isn't like a hard fact or anything. It's more of something that we call in the academic community something I just made up. This is something that I would call a strong correlation, but that does not mean it is causation. So why did Japan start drinking milk after World War II? I believe it was two different things. Two different reasons as to why the dairy industry started to flourish in Japan post World War II. Some of you might know this, some of you might not. I guess that could go for anything. As some of you may know, Japan went through a bit of a rebranding after World War II. After World War II, Japan went from imperialist hyper-Nazis to whatever, you know, like this is. So what happened there? And I promise this is related to why they're drinking milk now. So during World War II, Japan was basically just as bad as the Nazis. They were worse. Just look into Unit 731, the Man King. Look up how many Chinese prisoners they were able to release after World War II. They dragged the U.S. into the war with a fucking terrorist attack. They used human shields like something out of a Looney Tunes cartoon. Just look into it, you know? Tinfoil hat. We got them on, boys. We got them on. What stupid shit are we gonna say today? But then just a few years later from this, they became allies with the United States. How did that happen? So there was two things that happened that made Japan get a little bit more Western. The first thing that happened was kawaii culture, which is a organic cultural revolution similar to the hippies in the United States. And the second thing is something called the MacArthur Plan. The MacArthur Plan was a focused, intentional, and coordinated plan to westernize Japan. So what the MacArthur Plan accomplished is that we installed a parliament in Japan that is similar to the parliament in Britain. So now all of a sudden their entire government is European structured, and we started intentionally importing American and Western culture into Japan, like movies, music, milk. Perhaps that's the tinfoil hat part. And with kawaii culture, what kawaii culture really was a protest from younger generations in Japan to protest what their fathers and grandfathers did in World War II. Again, their grandfathers and fathers were hyper-Nazis. And how do you best effectively protest your hard-ass grandfather hyper-Nazi? How do you protest this? It's with shit like this, apparently. What younger generations in Japan were doing at that time to promote kawaii culture was going to college and reading, intentionally reading books meant for kids with very childlike drawings and themes. So therefore, wasting time and going to school and reading about these childish, like, cutesy things was just a direct slap in the face for everything that this guy stood for. So with the MacArthur Plan importing Western values and cultures into Japan, and the kawaii culture also happening at the same time. That was the perfect cocktail that could happen to degrade the imperialist image that Japan had in previous generations. It absolutely squashed the whole like rising sun thing. Listen, all I'm saying, tinfoil hat, they hit us with Pearl Harbor, we got involved, now they're drinking milk. GG, I don't know. I'm just asking questions. I'm just asking questions. You gotta wonder why they drink milk, especially since like 70 to 90% of Japanese people are, say it with me, lactose intolerant. Woo! We're gonna write that down, baby. History's funny in a way that there is a direct link between Pearl Harbor and the Japanese having to drink milk. You're welcome, Japan. That one's for it's in the Arizona. I am so sorry that we are the way that we are, kinda. So like I said, this bill is the thing that made the advertising for milk start to go from like already kind of crazy to absolutely fucking absurd. And let me give y'all an example. At my school, I specifically remember in my cafeteria, this was elementary school, there was a food pyramid painted on the biggest cafeteria wall. And it had all the, you know, the regular bread, rice, meats, and cheeses. Cheese is already a red flag. But I specifically remember there was a tidal wave of milk flowing up and over the food pyramid, flooding it completely. It was to the point that the wall was like 80% milk and 20% food pyramid. You'd have to like search for the food pyramid in all the milk. And not to mention all the Got Milk posters, which was one of, if not the most widespread marketing campaign that we have ever seen in the course of human history. Marketing for milk has gotten absolutely out of control, and it's because of the 1946 National School Lunch Act. And the marketing for milk gets even crazier when you take into account that in the 1940s, that's when milk consumption hit its peak, and it has been steadily going downhill ever since then. And as milk consumption continued to go down in staggering numbers, milk advertising actually went up proportionally. I drew a graph. Just for an example, this is around the time period that the dairy industry started promoting milk as essential to child development. They were basically like, yeah, I mean, cow titty, people titty, what's the difference? But people still weren't buying it. People were not consuming milk, as you can clearly see by the factually accurate graph. Milk consumption continued to go down throughout the 60s and 70s because of plant-based milk and soda alternatives. So during this time, we have plant-based milk alternatives, we've got soda coming out, both impacting the milk industry heavily. And plus, during this time, we discovered lactose intolerance. Yeah, give it up. Woo! And this is a big one because apparently somewhere between 60 and 90% of human beings are lactose intolerant. So you can see why the discovery of this would make milk sales plummet. And then also in the 70s, the USDA recommended that milk be drank in moderation. Forgot the end. Mark Hegstead, which is apparently a real name, was a human nutritionist for the USDA, and he said they, dairy farmers, thought or assumed that the primary obligation of the USDA was to protect and promote agriculture. But that is not what the USDA is supposed to do. That's just what Big Dairy wanted the USDA to do. So Mr. Mark Hegstead, I hate his last name. So Mark, he was a big proponent of milk being drank in moderation. He was assigned a different position the following year. He got reassigned, or in other words, fired from the job that he was doing. Big Dairy said all this moderation nonsense, nah. We'll see you later. USDA recommended milk be drank, bitch. Moderation, my asshole. But the advertising for milk definitely doesn't start there. It only gets worse. In 1983, something called the Dairy Production Stabilization Act of 1983 was created. And that created something called the National Dairy Promotion and Research Board, who had the singular goal of promoting dairy sales. And by the way, it's not just liquid milk that they're trying to get rid of by forcing it down the throats of the masses. Just for a small example, cheese. It can be milk in any form, whether it be solid, liquid, or gas. If it's milk and they can sell it, they want it inside you. So let's talk about cheese. Ronald Reagan, you guys remember this cutie? At this point in time, the dairy industry had produced so much milk and sold so little of it that they had to do something with it. So they made it into cheese, and the government started buying that cheese. And at one point, the government had 560 million pounds of cheese. That's a lot of goddamn cheese. Here, I even wrote a song about how much cheese that is. God damn, that's a lot of cheese. Okay, it turns out I undersold it with how much cheese the government had. See, I said that it had 560 million pounds of cheese, but that must have been in the 80s. As it turns out, there is somewhere between 1.4 and 1.5 billion pounds of cheese stored in some cave in Missouri. Here, listen, I wrote another song about how much cheese 1.4 billion pounds of it is. There's so much goddamn cheese. And this cheese was basically a welfare program where we were just gonna give a bunch of cheese to poor people. So far the government, for Big Dairy, has manipulated the market to force milk on kids and cheese on poor people. And you know what the worst part of it is? You know what they make people drink in prison? Water. We force kids in school to drink milk, but the primary beverage drank in prison is water. America has one of the biggest prison complexes in the world, and we're not giving these people milk. If I was the CEO of Big Dairy today, prisoners would be sucking on some cow titty tomorrow. How did they miss it? I actually don't understand that one. You know the joke that kids always make? I used to make the same joke when I was in school, like, oh, prison food's better than the stuff they serve us here in school. Turns out they're not fucking wrong. Unironically true-based, red-pilled, and factual. You hear me over there? Don't make me come over there. So obviously nobody's buying milk. We're not eating that much cheese. The surplus for milk has not gone away. We don't know what to do with it. They are literally just dumping it in the ground. We're feeding it to kids. We're feeding it to poor people at rates that are astonishing, but yet somehow still ineffective. The surplus is still there. Frowny face. Milk is advertised all over our schools. They make it intentionally hard to get milk alternatives to kids in our schools, but yet we still have a surplus that we have no idea what to deal with. Milk takes an unbelievable toll on our environment every single year, and there is hardly anybody drinking it, and yet it is illegal to talk shit about. Not explicitly illegal to talk about, but Mariel Williamson did have to go to fucking court just to protest milk at her school. Now, I might be coming off as some kind of milk hater. I know people in the comments are saying, like, but what about the calcium? And here's the thing with the calcium. There's a lot of other shit you can get calcium from. Calcium that you don't even have to suck one of these for. And say it with me, kids, why is the recommended serving amount of milk so fucking high? That's right, USDA and government lobbying. Woo! Everything's great. Everything's going fantastic here. Stop looking at me like that. And by the way, there aren't even enough conclusive studies to show that milk does really anything for your calcium. Or your bone strength, I should say. Because as it turns out, I can't believe I haven't mentioned this part in the video up to this point yet. Do you know, white people are the only ones who aren't lactose intolerant? It's just us. Just whiteys. Because when I read the numbers about 60 to 90% of human beings on planet Earth being lactose intolerant, I was like, how the fuck is that even possible? And then I kept reading, and it turns out, apparently, just us were weird enough to be out in the field one day and be like, give me that. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's how we got to the state that we're in today, with people like George Cheney in the 1800s, the guy that's responsible for the initial popularization of milk. By the way, he was allegedly a big advocate on exercise. He liked to write books and publish papers on the importance of exercising. Imagine this feller telling you that you need to exercise. I'd be pissed. Then we had the 1933 Agricultural Adjustment Act that subsidized dairy farmers, because that's when we started cranking out the milk. You know, factory farms, industrial revolution, the end of society as we know it. And we had the Federal Milk Marketing Orders of 1935. This is the milk legacy of our great president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. I almost forgot his name. The Federal Milk Marketing Orders of 1935 set a minimum price for milk in the 1930s. And then we have the big boy, the biggin. The biggin. Boogity, 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 boogity. And the big boy that I'm talking about, you all know him, you all love him, we all know it's the National School Lunch Program of 1946. This is the bill that forced you and everyone you know, and your kids one day probably, to drink milk. This is the bill that says every single school in the United States has to sell milk to kids, or that school is not going to get funding. This is the bill that says you cannot restrict the sale or marketing of milk, which means you cannot advertise alternatives to milk. You can't even tell kids that it's okay to not drink milk. Your kids, when they go to school, need to think that it's required for them to take milk. People cannot tell them that there are alternatives. This is also the bill that says milk alternatives should not be made available in any manner that interferes with the selection of components of the reimbursable meal, including low-fat or fat-free milk. The reimbursable meal that they're talking about was provided through the National School Lunch Program of 1946. So in this bill, you can't advertise against milk, you can't speak negatively about milk, and you can't make milk alternatives be easily accessible, or else you will lose funding for your school. That's great. So all of this is the reason why your life kind of sucks. Like all the time, sun up to sundown, 24 hours out of the day, just suck it. So ladies and gentlemen, this is how we got here. Where are we at today specifically? Where we're at today is a college-aged hippie chick in California can't protest milk at her school. And not being able to protest something is, say it with me, ladies and gentlemen, un-American. Woo! Remember, Mario Williamson had to go to court just to talk about the downsides of milk at her school. The principal of that school literally could not give her permission to do this, or he would be, say it with me, out of a job. We are at the point where schools in Oklahoma and Kansas cannot even tell their kids that they do offer milk alternatives at the school, even when in those schools in Oklahoma and Kansas, they noticed that their kids were throwing out 41% of the milk that was sold at the school. Just the kids were going through the line, buying milk, not opening it, and throwing it in the trash.
Know your fucking place, trash.
Those schools in Oklahoma and Kansas tried to put up posters that said, it is okay to not get milk. I think the poster said something along the lines of, we do sell milk alternatives. You don't have to get milk. The USDA sent agents out to those schools, said, hey, if you don't take that down, you're gonna be out of a fucking job. That might have sounded like a joke because it is fucking outrageous. That is not a joke. The USDA, I think, sent agents down to the agents came to those schools and said, if you don't take those posters down, you're going to lose funding. Big milk must not be threatened at schools at any cost. Like I said, in the National School Lunch Program, there's a line in the bill that says milk alternatives should not be made available in any manner that interferes with the selection of components of the reimbursable meal, including low-fat or fat-free milk. Basically, this program, this one, just says, hey, we're gonna offload our entire agricultural surplus onto kids, and if you try to stop that, we're not going to give you money anymore. And what does that mean? If every school in the US just decided to, we're not doing milk anymore, that means every school will become private. The only schools that could be open would be private if that was the case, for the most part. I'm kind of just pulled that one out of my ass. Sounded good though, didn't it? You know, we're having fun down here. So you can't protest milk. You can't really offer milk alternatives. You can't advertise for anything against milk, which makes it really hard for kids to get anything except for milk in schools. But I mean, I might be coming off as sort of like a milk hater, right? Like, sure, they make it super easy to get milk and hard to get other products, but it's not like the government's like just forcing kids to buy milk in the cafeteria. I mean, obviously the government wouldn't do that, right? "20% of schools in the United States of America require kids to have milk for lunch every day. Require, that's a big word. Require. That's a lot of kids. Forcing people to eat or drink anything obviously is fucked up. It's way more fucked up when you account for the fact that 44% of people in the United States are lactose intolerant. They're forcing 44% of people that go to school in the United States of America to go to school, drink milk, and then shit themselves. So 20% of kids in schools right now are required to have milk. And it's safe to say that around 44% of those kids probably have lactose intolerance. But not whiteys though. What the fuck? Leave it in the comments. Is it more weird or racist to be proud about the fact that I can digest something that comes out of one of these? Leave it in the comment. I want to know your I want to know your feelings. And by the way, up until this point, we've only talked about the sales of liquid milk to children. The forced sale of liquid milk to children in our public school system. That doesn't account for the cheese. You guys want to talk about some cheese? I just marked all the way down this chair. Fuck. You guys remember, I don't know if all schools do this, but mine definitely did, and everyone that I've ever heard of does this. So do you guys remember going to school and like at least once a week, maybe on a Thursday or every Friday, you would get Papa John's or Domino's? And at the time, if you were anything like me, every Thursday or Friday when they offered Papa John's, you were probably like, hey, holy shit, I can eat regular garbage instead of government garbage. It was a nice little change of pace, a nice little switch up. You could have like regular food that adults eat instead of whatever this is. And at the time, I thought it was just like, you know, the schools wanted to be nice, or like it was just a fun little thing that the government did for kids. I'm stupid now. I was probably a couple IQ points away from getting benefits from the government when I was younger. Yeah, I just thought the government wanted to spend millions of dollars on Papa John's every year so the kids could have a nice little treat on Thursdays. Genius, head too big, brain wrinkle, ah. But it wasn't a fun little treat. If you've been paying any attention to this video, you probably know where this is going. Papa John's was not just a little treat that the schools can give to kids to be nice. What it was is a way to offload cheese, if you could fucking believe it. Just as a disclaimer, everybody get your tinfoil hats back out. We're not done with them bitches yet. Put them back on. See, there is a company called Dairy Management Incorporated. These guys have the express goals to increase dairy sales in the United States. What they do is get into corporate partnerships with fast food chains and just restaurants in general in the US. And through those partnerships, they get together and figure out ways on how to shove cheese, milk, and butter down your throat better. These guys have partnerships with Domino's. And the way these companies kind of interact with each other is that Dairy Management Inc. tells Domino's like, hey, put more cheese on your shit. And then that extra cheese on that pizza is sold to your kids. And by the way, you can see what these guys are up to basically everywhere in restaurants. You know those absurd Taco Bell deals where it's like the 7 cheese melt blend? You think the people at Taco Bell just organically came up with the idea of like, let's just put 7 different cheeses on the same tortilla? No, it was old DMI over here. That's the only thing that they do, basically. You can see them all over any restaurant that has like a 27 cheese blend of this or extra gooey cheesy deluxe mega cheese deal. That's just what they do. You can see it everywhere in every restaurant you go to, basically. And all that's to do is to increase dairy sales and make people eat more cheese. And this goes against the federal dietary guidelines because of course it does. This shit is not good for you. And with this type of shit directly going against federal dietary guidelines, it's weird that people often make the argument that, you know, milk is just like a cheap and effective way to give kids nutrients. If they were worried about nutrients or just health in general, they would not be offering Papa John's with your chocolate milk. That's another thing you got to keep in mind. It's not a health thing. If it was a health thing, there would not be that weird ass strawberry or chocolate milk flavors at school. Ew. And parents actually got together at one point in time to get chocolate milk out of schools, but the USDA didn't go along with it because dairy farmers were like, well, what if we just take the sugar out of it? And the USDA was like, whatever you want. Do whatever all the time, whenever you want. Because as we all know, if it doesn't have sugar in it, it's automatically healthy. That's why I'm proposing a meal plan to the USDA that we put in new diet cigarettes in every school coast to coast, Monday through Friday. I mean, just think about it. 0 sugar, gluten-free, cool. So we're forcing kids to drink milk at this level, not because it's like pragmatic or healthy by any means, it's because the dairy industry. The only reason we even think that milk is like even remotely healthy for us is because of marketing that took place in the 17 and 1800s. If we were worried about kids drinking like healthy stuff at schools, it would be, I mean, obviously water, but even with the plant-based stuff that I'm personally never going to drink, ew. If we were worried about the health of our kids in the United States more than our dairy industry, we would have those alternatives. We would have water for sure be the main staple of every meal. We're giving these people taxes so they can overproduce milk and then sell your tax money to your kids. What the fuck are we doing? The entire dairy industry is held up with nothing but like government subsidies and forced advertising and duct tape. With forced advertising, what I'm talking about is their ads that are specifically targeted towards like Gen Z and younger. For God's sake, they even got Mr. Beast to come out and shill for Big Milk. This is real, by the way. I'm not editing this. This is just what happened. And along with Mr. Beast, they also got Aubrey Plaza.
Is wood milk real? Absolutely not. Only real milk is real. Then what did I invest in?
So it's wild what we're doing for Big Milk, and it honestly kind of feels like I'm preaching into the void about this subject, because it does not look like it's about to stop. It is only ramping up. Going against Big Milk is literally going against 200 years of targeted and focused effort, in parts by the government and Big Dairy. By the way, the Venn diagram between Big Dairy and the government look like a little, I'll draw it. Ta-da! It's a circle. The Venn diagram for Big Dairy and the government is basically a circle. There might be like one infinitesimally small little ring around the main circle, but it's basically a circle. There are a lot of executives from Big Dairy that went to work for the government, and most executives for Big Dairy now came from the government. So can you believe it, folks? A white guy in his basement who looks like me bitching for 45 minutes about the government. I'm just kidding. I'm not actually in my basement right now. Jimmy actually trapped me in a shipping container and told me in, you know, his Mr. Beast voice, like, if you don't make a YouTube video, you are going to die in here. But I did. I made the video, Jimmy. You guys can get me out of here. It's rendering right now, Jimmy. Jimmy. Please. Help me. Help me. Jimmy. I hope he sees that. I hope Mr. Beast sees that.